There were exactly 5 grooves in the crystal. Yu Jung-hyuk and I were well aware of what to place there. Yu Jung-hyuk stood next to me and said, "You came." "Yes, unfortunately." "It doesn't matter if you sit this one out." I turned towards Yu Jung-hyuk at the unexpected words. This guy was still talking without looking at me. "You have a woman you love." "What?" "It'll be hard." I felt like I understood something that couldn't be resolved. Perhaps he didn't want me to take to the scenario out of care towards me? It was ridiculous. Yu Jung-hyuk? It could be the last time. I shook my head. It wasn't necessarily impossible when I thought about it. Yu Jung-hyuk had lost Lee Sol-hwa in the second regression. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Yu Jung-hyuk was arguably the world's greatest authority when it came to losing a loved one. I told him, "It's not like that. Do you think my face is full of love?" I didn't mean it, but the words sounded like self-deprecation. Let me say this first. I have a decent face. Yu Jung-hyuk stared at me quietly and said, "Certainly. I don't care if you die." Shit! Your words are too harsh. I'm hurt. Don't forget I still have 1 hit left. Oh yes, I'd almost forgotten. Thanks for reminding me. I didn't know if this bastard wanted me to live or die. I communicated directly to my companions through the group chat. "I will inform you of the precautions now." Using the group chat meant that things should be kept secret. The party members focused on my story while pretending to be quiet. The warp crystal transports 2 people together. That's why we will move in pairs, like I mentioned before. Yu-sung will be with me as Team 1, Hee-won-shi and Hyung-sung-shi will be as Team 2. Yu-sung-ah-shi and number 406 will be Team 3. Gil-young doesn't have a partner, so he will go with Yu Jung-hyuk's group. That Yu Jung-hyuk, he can take care of himself. You might become dizzy when moving through the crystal. Please don't panic. The scenario will start as soon as you arrive. Keep in mind that once the scenario contents open, I was rapidly pouring out words when the Dokkaebi appeared on top of the warp crystal. "Wait a minute. I'm really sorry, but I have an emergency announcement." Emergency announcement? "I forgot to mention that the number of people who can participate from Soul Dome is 8, not 10. What are you suddenly saying? All the participants were fixed. Looking closer, this was the Dokkaebi who asked me about how to update the scenario in the underworld. Was he called Young-ki? This scenario. There are those who have already gone to the 6th scenario due to the dimension warping and the 5th scenario becoming twisted. There are already people? Yes, Soul Dome already has 2 people in the scenario. That reminded me. Han Soo-young and Gung Pildu were already in the scenario. I saw them on the screen in the underworld, but had forgotten for a moment. By the way, part of the dimension warped. It seemed that the intermediate Dokkaebi had intervened quite a bit in the scenario to kill me. It might be a scenario error, but I am removing 2 of the existing spots for fairness. What? You can't do that, then who the hell is going? The people who weren't even going were the most upset. The party members looked at me with troubled expressions. Even Yu Jung-hyuk was watching me. It was an expression that told me to make the decisions. Damn. Unexpectedly, the first to raise her hand was Yu-sung-ah. "I'll stay back." She noticed my difficulty and decided to be considerate first. I had to take that grandmother, even if I lost Yu-sung-ah. Next it was Jung Hee-won who raised her hand. "I will also stay back. Isn't there a secondary allocation anyway? Is it okay? Deok-shi looks worried today, but don't you know? This time that scary person is on the same side." Certainly, it was reassuring if Jung Hee-won and Yu-sung-ah were left behind. They would be able to make it into the second allocation, even if there was a lot of competition. In the end, the 2 people who dropped out and Lee Hyung-sung paired up with the grandmother. The grandmother looked somewhat happy. Just before we left, I whispered to Yu-sung-ah, "I forgot to say this, but tell the King of Wanderers to be wary of Jon Il-du. I think you already know why." Yu-sung-ah nodded and hesitated before whispering to me, "Don't die." I nodded. Then Jung Hee-won asked, "Aren't you departing now? I'm not a constellation, but they must be impatient." Yu-sung-ah blushed and retreated while my party and I approached the warp crystal. I pulled out everything that I had acquired from the disasters. The protection symbol of the Immuntar, protection symbol of the parasites, the protection symbol of the Genobel. Then Yu Jung-hyuk and number 406 pulled out one each. They were protection symbols obtained from defeating the disaster of ice and the disaster of water. Insert the 5 protection symbols. The message flowed from the warp crystal and we placed them in the grooves. There were 5 protection symbols. It was proof that this world was protected from the disasters. Only those who survived the disasters were qualified to go to other worlds. The qualifications are complete. The warp crystal is activated. The crystal split into 4 pieces, and a blue-colored door was created. We entered in pairs. Shin Yu-sung and I held each other firmly and moved through the door. The main scenario has been updated. I opened my eyes and Shin Yu-sung and I were in a green forest. We stumbled and felt the clay texture of the soil. I was dizzy enough to vomit. I told the party members not to panic, but it was funny that I was the only feeling dizzy. I looked around and saw that Shin Yu-sung was in the midst of vomiting. Are you okay? I patted Shin Yu-sung's back and looked around. My mind was confused, but I couldn't stay in this chaotic state. I looked in front of me, behind me, and to the side. Only the forest was visible. We were in the middle of the forest. It was a scenery that was too similar to Earth. The main scenario, Abandoned World, has begun. The scenario message rose straight away. However, I couldn't afford to check the details of the main scenario now. I could already feel the killing intent from nearby bushes. Yu-sung. Shin Yu-sung came to her senses and raised her head. Rustling sounds came from the bushes. This was one of the places where new scenario entrants were warped to. If I assume the worst, those in the bushes were the incarnations of other countries that arrived in advance. I nervously prepared to use the bookmark skill. Maybe those who warped to this world were the elite among the elites. If I didn't do my best in the beginning, my head could fly in the blink of an eye. However, the thing that emerged from the bushes wasn't what I expected. The 7th grade monster, Steel Wolf, has appeared. The same expression appeared on Shin Yu-sung's face when she heard it was a 7th grade monster. It was funny. We were probably the only ones who could be relieved by this message. I think they are quite small, Ajishi. Given the fact that typical monsters were the size of a house, the current steel wolves were the size of ordinary wolves. There were approximately 10 of them. It wasn't a difficult number to deal with. The character Shin Yu-sung has used Advanced Diverse Communication Level 3. Shin Yu-sung used Advanced Diverse Communication to make the monsters fight each other. Those Shin Yu-sung failed to tame were killed by the Blade of Faith. The 7th grade monsters were unbelievably fragile. It seemed that their strength was reduced as their size became smaller. Shin Yu-sung wondered, there were no coins? The event is over. There aren't even any items. There are no cores. There's a lot of difference in stats. Are they really 7th grade monsters? They seem more like 9th grade. Shin Yu-sung looked a bit lost. It was probably because the first monsters she met after being so tense were weak. That reminded me, the condition of the forest was a bit strange. This type of forest would normally have trees that rose far above my head. However, these trees were only a little bit taller than my head. The contents of the scenario were still a mystery. There was only the title Abandoned World, while everything else was still filled with question marks. The scenario activation conditions haven't been met yet. I jumped up a bit and looked around. Fortunately, the height of trees were so low I could see the scenery of the surrounding area just by jumping lightly. It isn't all a forest. Let's go over there. In fact, I knew what to expect if I left this zone. We moved along a forest path. Not long afterwards, the forest ended and the plains appeared. On the plains, Ajishi? We faced a group of soldiers. They appeared! It really is a scenario! Someone shouted at us. It sounded like Korean, even if it was an alien language. The confused Shin Yu-sung stepped towards me. Hundreds of troops were filling the vast plains. There were dozens of cavalry and hundreds of archers. In addition, there were hundreds of infantry. There were enough people for a war waiting for us here. Everybody prepare their skills. Prepare to advance. Numerous people pointed spears and lances at us. We didn't do anything, but were seen as enemies. Attack! It would obviously be an overwhelming sight if it was normal. If only it wasn't for their size. Wah! The troops running across the plants were small people, the size of my fist. Shin Yu-sung cried out, "The people are very small." They are the inhabitants of this place. Surely we don't have to fight them, no? Shin Yu-sung stepped away from the small people who were running. I feel sorry because they are so small. You have met with the people of this world. Check the scenario contents. Then a scream came from the different distance. A disaster has appeared on the other side. Quack! Run away! Full retreat! The small people rushing towards us started running away. It was due to the incarnations killing the small people in the distance. Ha ha ha! What is this? There's really an easy scenario. It was probably a foreign language being interpreted. There were 2 samurai wielding swords. They were Japanese. They were as playful as they casually cut down the small people like bugs. Shin Yu-sung watched the ruthless butchery and cried out in a stricken voice, Ajashi, what is this scenario? What should we do? I knew why Yu Jung-hyuk didn't want to bring Shin Yu-sung. If I thought about it, he might be more humane than me. It isn't just our planet that runs scenarios in the star stream. I pointed to all the small people fleeing the plains. This scenario is a scenario that we share with them. Many of the constellations are hungry for violence and blood. A significant number of constellations are urging you to make a bold choice. The main scenario is activated. Main scenario number 6, Abandoned World. Category, Main, difficulty, S. Clear conditions, wipe out all dominant species on the number 9,871 planetary system, the planet called Peaceland. Time limit, 40 days. Compensation, 200,000 coins. Unknown. Failure, unknown. In the 6th scenario, we no longer have the role of preventing a disaster. You have become a disaster of the planet Peaceland. In this world, we must be the disasters that destroyed this world.